Yesterday I was invited to go out with Mr. Gupta ji, and he took me to a lecture last night. And you would have thought that the lecture itself would be the message of the evening to me, but it was an interesting lecture, but something happened in the lecture hall before the lecture that I found entertaining and instructive that pertains to today's subject. Today's subject is understanding your purpose in life. And before the lecture started, people were walking in, and so I'm sitting there. And of course, there's always a certain amount of confusion and milling around, and particularly in India, if there's a video crew and the lighting and the sound system, there's all kinds of last-minute problems, challenges. And so I expect to see that. But I saw something that I didn't expect. There was a point at which one of the fellows from the group that I think was connected to the speaker, I noticed that he was walking up and down the aisles, and he was sort of casually, like he was just walking, but he had a spray can in one hand. And he was spraying something into the room. A little bit like if you've been on an airplane, you know, before they land, they spray the whole cabin to kill all the bugs because they don't want to share bugs internationally. So I thought this was a little strange. I'm thinking, I've never seen that in a lecture hall. It was a nice hall. He's going on, he's spraying stuff. So I said to Mr. Gupta, what do you think he's spraying? He says, oh, it's probably some kind of deodorant. I'm thinking, that's really strange. I have never heard of such a thing. And then I'm thinking, of course, he could be a bioterrorist and we're all going to get sick and that'll be that. And I'm going to go, Om Guru, here we go. So, but I thought, this is really a good metaphor for our life purpose. Because basically, when we are born and we come into the world and the culture in which we live, we are sprayed an aroma, a perfume of what it is that we're supposed to be doing in this world. And that aroma is covering up something underneath. Now, in the case of this hall, maybe the underneath aroma wasn't so nice. But in the case of life, there's an aroma underneath that most people are missing by the things that we do to cover up life itself. So let's see, you're born, you explore your little world, and then you play, and then eventually you go to school, and you're educated. And then in Indian society, and it's not much different generally in America, you go out and establish yourself in the business world, and then you get married, and you have children. And if you're a good citizen, you once you've raised your kids, and then you serve the community in some way, and then you then you get old, and your kids take care of you. and you hope that during your life you experience a little bit of love, that you love others and that they love you. And this is really as much as most people expect out of life. This is really it. And we all know, no matter what path your life takes, doesn't really matter what path your life takes, you're going to have some good days, and you're going to have some rough days. Some days where, things aren't looking too good. And some people have way more rough days than good days. And some people seem to have more good days than rough days. And the aroma that we're given, the cover-up, is that the way to have more good days than bad days is to seek your pleasure, to seek the fulfillment of your desires. What do you desire? Fulfill it. That will lead to the most that you can expect in this world, and that we label as happiness. We say happiness is the fulfillment of your desires. But what the yoga teachings say is that's a cover-up. That's a spray. Because if you really look at the truth of what's going on, you recognize that the people who seek fulfillment in that way, generally speaking, aren't happy. They might be what you would describe as entertainingly involved for a period of time, and that might put a smile on their face. But how long does that smile last? Does that smile carry into their daily job? Why is it one of the popular franchise restaurants is called TGIF? Thank God it's Friday. And what's the worst day of the week? Monday. Now, why is that? If people were having fun at work, they wouldn't think that. But that most people don't have happiness at work. I was in a business here in India some years ago, and I was trying to convince them to do one of our training programs to bring a positive attitude and positive self-development skills into the workplace. But I was waiting for the man that I was supposed to speak with, and I was in this large room of desks that were tightly packed together, and there was a bunch of workers in there looking at their desks like, and what you could see was it wasn't so much that they were being productive, they were looking around to make sure nobody was going to get them into trouble. And there was a supervisor sitting on the side in the middle, and we started a little interaction, a little talking, and his basic philosophy of life was, you shouldn't enjoy work. Work is work. Get to work. Do your job. You're not supposed to be enjoying this. I'm going, wow, this is going to be a tough sell. This is not going to be an easy environment in which to convince people that there is something really nice underneath this cover-up of our misunderstandings about what life needs to be like, what life is. We have so many identifications, my purpose. There's little purposes and there's big purposes. The little purposes could be the fulfillment of my interests. If you're a tennis player or a football player or a scientist, whatever it is that you're interested in, you might have the purpose of becoming the best in your field of interest. That's a purpose. Some people have the purpose, when you're a young teenager, particularly in America, your purpose is to fall in love. Your purpose is to find the right mate, or at least someone for a while that you really can enjoy their company with. And of course, college kids have a reputation, particularly in America. Their purpose is to get drunk, to party. This is, and of course there are lists that they put out about the best schools to get the best education from and such. But there's also a list of the best party schools. And you can be sure that the young people are checking that list out just as much as what job they might get as a result of their scholastic career. Of course, many people, as they get older, they want to fall in love. They have a family, raise children, And all of these goals, any of these goals, if they're positive goals, are good goals. There's nothing wrong with those things. But are they in themselves going to lead to a dynamic state of happiness? Well, look at the people who do that. Look at the lives of people who you would consider to be dynamically happy. There aren't very many. Very few people are what I would describe as dynamically happy. And what you find is that in those people, you find that their purpose, their life purpose, is not just the fulfillment of their personal interests, or their personal interests also include the interests of others. The interests of others must be a part of our approach to life if we really want to be happy. And if your purpose in life is, for example, to be the greatest skier on earth, well, that might be a little tough to who are you serving by your desire to be a great skier? But you can balance your life by serving others in some other way. And you find many celebrities do charities and a wide variety of things to create some kind of balance in their lives. So your personal interests don't have to be the center of your service, but this concept that you must include more than just your personal self-interests in the way that you understand your life purpose if you want to be happy. If you want to just go from a good day to bad day, which even people who are happy have good days. You know, Jesus had some bad days. He was a good person, but he had some really tough days. Name a saint who didn't have a tough day. In fact, you might say that one of the signs of saintliness is that you have a lot of tough days. But what you find, I observed this over 40 years with Kriyanandaji. I never have known anybody who had more health problems than he did. Seriously, the whole time I've known him, he had health problems. It was just one thing after another. Sometimes with a break between, sometimes not. Later in life, there was always something going on. I never met a person who was more even-minded, who was able to basically ignore it most of the time. And that the purpose of his actions wasn't to ignore it so that he could be happier for himself, but because his purpose was to serve others. His purpose was to live up to the ideals and the instructions that his guru had given him. And so his frame of reference was completely different than the worldly person's. Because the worldly person seeks comfort. The person who wants to be happy seeks truth, seeks right action, dharma, seeks to express that which is highest in life. And this is one of the really important principles of understanding life purpose, is that we must link our sense of life purpose to that which is highest in life. If we link our life purpose to self-interest, little self-interest, I want to be famous, I want to be wealthy, I want candy, cake, buildings, cars, and I will do things that are injurious to others in order to get those things, that will never lead to happiness. So you could say that, well, let me say it this way. People who attach their sense of life purpose to selfish, egotistical self-interests are never happy. And you can see this worldwide. No matter what culture you look at, those egotistical, self-interested people who step on others and take advantage of others and don't care about others, they're never happy. They can't even enjoy the wealth that they have. They can't enjoy all the people that bow to them because those same people would stab them in the back if he wasn't watching. And yet, in most cultures today, they advertise the aroma of success, outward success. So our life purpose, as presented in the media, our life purpose is to get the latest model car, to buy the latest fashion, to have jewelry, to have the neighbors a little jealous of how well we're doing. All of these things, none of which lead to happiness. All of which you could be happy with or without. It's not that those things keep us from being happy in themselves. It's the way that we approach the way that we live. And this is one of the key things to understand too, is our life purpose has very little to do with what we do. So many people struggle, should I be a lawyer? Should I be a doctor? Should I do this? Should I do that? God doesn't care what you do. Whether you're a doctor or lawyer, your karma will drive you in a certain direction. But those outward things are not the key issue if you want to be happy. The key issue is the consciousness, the spirit that you live with while you do those things. The attitudes by which we participate in life. And this is one of the things that amazed me when I arrived in Ananda village. When I was a young man in 1972, I arrived. And I had lived in a wealthy community. I was raised in a wealthy community. And people had everything. They had everything that they wanted. And I had yet to meet a happy person. I saw people who had good days and bad days. I saw people who acted like they were happy. But the key was, the thing that I began to understand is that it was all aroma. It was all a room freshener. There was nothing underneath. So you see all these beautiful homes side by side, and inside you've got yelling and screaming and hitting the kids and arguing and fighting over what television program you're going to watch, and just nothing but aggravation. So I knew that those things in themselves weren't the solution to my own unhappiness. Because in my family, all of that stuff was going on. And I would just go and try to stay out of it because I didn't enjoy it. But I didn't have any alternative. When I arrived at Ananda village, I had never been with a group of people that were just happy all the time. If it was raining, they were happy. If it was snowing and they were really cold, they were happy. If they had to go through the mud, if they had to, no running water, no electricity, no telephone. Half the people didn't have any cars. Almost everybody lived below the national poverty level economically. And they were all happy. Of course, in a certain way, they were happy because they didn't have to put up with the aroma of society. They were living in the country with fresh air and nature. It was beautiful. But there was something deeper going on, much deeper. And what I found, of course, I had read Autobiography of a Yogi already. I knew what I was trying to get to. In fact, I was already a Kriyaban. But I had been on my own. I'd never been in an environment that supported my desire to connect more deeply to spirit inside myself. And it was very difficult I didn't have any friends that were interested. When I got to Ananda, I found this group of young people who just every day was an adventure. Every day was an opportunity, not, even when things went wrong all the time. But instead of calling it a disaster, we called it a learning experience. It's the same experience, but a completely different state of mind. At that time, in fact, before I came to Ananda, I had lived in the city. Well, I actually tried to join SRF in America, YSS in India, as a monk. And they told me there was a 2-year waiting list. I said, well, what am I supposed to do while I'm waiting? He says, well, you should go to university, but go near one of the centers, and then, so you can go to church regularly. Well, the thing is, all their centers were in the cities. I couldn't stand living in the city. I was just like, it had a bad aroma to me. Too much stuff. So I found a college that I could go to in a beautiful, smaller city. No temple near it. But he said, go to school. I went to school. But even that was too cityfied for me. And after half a year, I transferred to a school in the country in Oregon. And I lived in a barn. And I was doing what he told me to do. I was going to school, but nobody around me had any interest in the spiritual life. And eventually I decided that, I just can't wait. I can't just, sit on the shelf for 2 years before they're going to let me in. And I found out about Ananda, and I came to Ananda, and I found this environment that was manifesting the ideals that I had read about in Autobiography of a Yogi. The ideal that the nature of life is Ananda. It's bliss. The nature of all of life is one unified reality. And that reality is incredibly dynamic. And it's so powerful that it overcomes all limited obstacles of the creation. And so we read about the lives of the saints where they go through incredible challenges, but somehow, instead of just sort of bending and sort of gritting their teeth, I'm going to get through this, they're joyful the whole time. Kriyanandaji was always happy. I never saw him down. Never saw him having what most people would describe as a bad day. And it wasn't that he, of course, I've mentioned the physical challenges, but creating Ananda village, the community, the Sangha, over a period of 40 years, let me tell you, that was no easy task. Getting just a handful of people to, even when they are trying to cooperate with the right spirit, it's still hard to keep it all coordinated. Because everybody comes to the table interested in cooperating, but that doesn't mean that they can maintain that positive spirit all the time. Each in their own way with their ups and downs. The thing that we need to understand is that the essential purpose of life is not so much what we do on the outside, but what's going on inside. And I remember years ago in Kashmir seeing the kids playing in the bus station. These kids, it's hard to imagine anybody being poorer than them, their families. They had no money. But the smiles on their faces when they were playing, they thought nobody was looking. And they were playing together. It was as much outward happiness as a child in the greatest palace. There was no difference. when you feel happy, even humanly happy, your happiness is no different than any other social, cultural, economic group. We're all the same in that way. But how deep will that happiness go? Will it become the core of your consciousness? Or will we continue to live on those ups and downs of life? Our purpose in life is not to attain any outward accomplishment. But those outward accomplishments can help us, if we have the right attitude, to attain inner happiness by the way that we relate to them. There's a great story in Indian tradition about Sukadeva, the son of Vyasa. And he went to see King Janaka, and he arrived at the palace, and he went in and had an audience with the king. And the king said, well, have you seen the place? And Sukadeva said, no, I just came right in to see you. He said, oh, you should go around and see the palace. Oh, but while you do that, here's a oil lamp. I want you to carry the lamp. Don't spill the oil. Go see the palace. So Sukadeva goes and he walks all around the palace. He doesn't want to spill any of the oil, it's going to look bad. So he comes back to Janaka after some time, because it's a big palace. And King Janaka notices, oh, you didn't spill the oil. And Sukadeva's feeling pretty good. Yeah, no, I didn't spill. And King Janaka says, so tell me about, what did you see? What do you like the most? And Sukadeva says, I didn't see anything. I only saw the oil. And so King Janaka says, well, you got to go again. And see the palace. Don't spill the oil. So he went around. He went all the way around again. And he came back. And this time he could tell the king, he didn't spill the oil, and he could tell the king what he had seen. And this analogy tells us that we have to pay attention to the oil of our inner connection to spirit, to the only real joy, the source of all that is underneath all temporary joy, but the actual ocean of infinite joy. This is the oil, and we have to stay connected to it while we participate in life. And that is our life's purpose. That we grow in our connection to spirit, whether you describe it as joy, wisdom, love, light, all of the manifestations of spirit, but all of the ways in which we feel connected to the source of ever-expanding, ever-new positive potential. And when we connect to it, and then we live with it while we do whatever we do, then the natural outcome of our participation in life will be positive. Not only for ourselves, but for others. Because it's the nature of joy to share itself. It's the nature of love to share itself. It's the nature of wisdom to share itself. So no matter what you're doing, you will naturally be bringing these positive attributes of spirit into your interactions, every interaction. And if you want to know, well, okay, Vijay, this is all nice, but I still have to figure out what I'm going to do tomorrow. What's my job going to be? Because I got to do something to make money to eat. How do you solve that challenge? By your connection to the ocean of understanding. By your connection to spirit, you will receive either the understanding about what to do, or you will be living in the synchronicity that will lead you to meet someone who will tell you about a job, which will lead to a positive circumstance. The key is to understand that the solution to our life purpose is not always chipping at one block, doing just one thing. It's about a totality of the way that we relate, most importantly inwardly, but then to bring that inward connection to spirit into our daily lives. And when that's happening properly, this leads, either slowly or quickly, depending on how successful we're at it, to graduation, to our merging into the infinite potential of joy. So you could say, and it's true, the larger life purpose of all souls is that we would be reunited in infinite spirit. And this is the totality of the meaning and the purpose of life. As souls, we're thrown out into the creation, and the only purpose is to have an entertaining journey on our way back to being one with the infinite ocean that we came from. This is God's Leela. And we are all actors in God's show. This is God's entertainment. And we, as souls, are parts of God that have volunteered to play in the play. But we've been caught up in the spray that this guy was putting down the. It didn't smell that good. I was saying, he was saying that he thought that it was a air freshener. I didn't think it was very fresh. I thought it was kind of stinky. And if you look at life, if you look at the natural inclination of the ego to overindulge, overindulgence is kind of stinky. On the surface, it seems sweet and pleasant, but it inevitably leads to sour. Overindulgence leads to suffering. So, if we want to understand our life purpose, we need to be connected inside of ourselves. We need to experience our inner reality, that sweet aroma of spirit, joy, peace, calmness. You can't expect to get calmness in a shop. You can't go down to the India Palace Mall and buy calmness. That place is the antithesis, the opposite of calmness. We need to invest in a period of time in our lives where, we spend so many years in school, but we never learn how to become higher self-educated. This is something that we have to take time in our lives to do the training, to experience the peace. Yoga is a science, it works. But if we don't give science a chance to work, then nothing happens. Through this inner experience, through this awakening of our natural soul's joy, we will begin to live our life's purpose on deeper and deeper levels. Of course, at the end of Kriyanandaji's life, it was interesting, in the 70s he wrote The Path, but in 2008 he wrote The New Path. And what he did is he took The Path and he rewrote it. It's a whole new book, because he wrote it with his consciousness from 2008, not 1976. And he had a deepened experience and deepened understanding of how to communicate what he had, felt inside, but his ability to communicate it got more and more improved. You look back at his life and you see that he was born to do what he did. He came in with the talents, with the abilities. He was charismatic as a young man. He, at the age of 15, had written a play about cooperative communities. He, as a young man, was seeking truth. And he had already, in grade school, he spoke 3 languages already. So you can see it, we call this, in America, we call it Monday morning quarterbacking. Notice when you look at the game from yesterday, you can see what should have happened. So when you look back at your life, you can say, oh man, I should have done that. I can see how I ended up here because I started here, and I went on. What we want to do is synchronize our sense of what we should be doing with God's view instead of the ego view. And when we allow ourselves to flow in God's view for our lives, we call it God's will. What is God's will for our lives? Our purpose is to live in tune with God's will for our lives. And the only way that we're going to know what that is through our attunement. If we're passive, then our karma will drive our lives. But if we're active, then the guru will drive your life. If you're active, the guru will help you to be aligned with the things that you need to do. There's one of my favorite stories that Swamiji's told over the years about this Sri Rama yogi that he met. Master met him when he came back to India in 1935. And of this great yogi, Master said, if I had spent even 5 more minutes in his presence, I never would have been able to leave India. And Kriyanandaji had the opportunity to meet him, and he went to see him. And this was a liberated being. This was God manifesting in a form. And, beautifully. And without ego restraint. Transcended. And Kriyananda asked, a natural question. He said, sir, you have so much to offer the world. You have a handful of disciples. Why aren't you out doing other stuff? He wasn't criticizing. He was just thinking, wow, you could do so much. And Sri Rama Yogi said, very sweetly, he said, God has done what he wants with this body. God has done what he wants with this body. This is our life purpose. What does God want to do through your life? And the only way that we can know that answer to that is through our attunement to God. We must dedicate ourselves to that. We must not give up and slow down and say, oh, well, it's too hard to know what God wants me to do. Or I don't know today what God wants me to do. Well, you do the best that you can. But if you don't continue in business, if you don't continue to increase your skills, you're falling back. You're not even staying even. You have to continue to expand. If we want to live our life's purpose, we have to live God's will for this life. And the way that we do that is through our attunement inside. We have to calm the mind. We have to be able to experience, not just in imagination, but in truth, our growing experience of our reality as spirit, not as ego. And through the practices that we follow, this is what we do, and this is why we do them. We don't do them just because the boss said you have to do it. We do them because this is the way to attune ourselves to God doing what God wants to do through this form, through this life. So, if you're interested in your life purpose, if you, at any time in life, want to understand more deeply, should I go left? Should I go right? The practical reality of that. And most importantly, how can I be happy? How can I be in tune with happiness no matter whether I go left or right? No matter whether I have a good day or a bad day. Then we must go within. We must go within and dedicate ourselves to that inner relationship. Through our inner relationship with Spirit, everything is solved. And that's why Krishna says in the Gita that the yogi is even-minded and cheerful. This is what I found when I came to Ananda village. And these were young disciples. We were all, 3 to 5 years. It doesn't take that, but it takes 3 to 5 years of intense participation. Master said that he could take young boys that had no experience in the spiritual life, and if they did what he told them to do, they could be saints in 3 years. Of course, that's an extreme circumstance. But we have to dedicate ourselves to that purpose. And that is our most important purpose. So through this attunement, you will find the solution to every life purpose, whether it be what should I cook for dinner, what kind of work should I do, what relationships should I have, what sangha should I participate in, what public service should I do, what car, how I should drive the car. Every solution in life needs to be connected to our inner relationship to Spirit. And it's through that relationship that we will transcend all of the ups and downs and experience the equanimity that comes with a sincere and deep practice of the spiritual life. Namaskar.